He and Josh Counting started a new evangelization summit, which is going for a number of years. At times, they would have up to 5,000 people participating live and online. They've had huge speakers. Michael has his SPL in the new evangelization. He got his SPL from Sacred Heart Seminary. And I heard him in Vancouver a few years ago. He came out, and his vision of the church and evangelization is really quite stellar. It's really impressive. So I give it over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Father. It's a great joy to be invited to be part of this. I wish I could be with you in Ottawa. I lived in Ottawa for about 12 years, but 3 years ago my family and I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I'm coming from there. When I first met with Father Justin to talk about this talk, I was taking a bunch of notes, and one of the things I scribbled down on my book was the question, what does the Spirit say to the church? And it reminded me of a story I heard. Ralph Martin wrote a book, what is it? The Catholic Church at the End of an Age, what does the Spirit say to the church? He wrote it back 30 years ago now. And he had an opportunity to meet with John Paul II. And after morning mass, to give a copy of that book to John Paul II. And John Paul II said, well, thank you, but I've already read it. I said, okay, great. And then John Paul II said to Ralph, he said, what does the Spirit say to the church? And Ralph looked at John Paul II, and he said, Jesus. And then John Paul II looked back at Ralph, nodded his head, and said, Jesus. And Ralph looked back at John Paul II and said to the Holy Father, Jesus. And the Holy Father looked back at Ralph and said, Jesus. That's what the Spirit is saying to the church. It's what the Spirit has always said to the church. You know, the Spirit is always pointing us through mission to Jesus. This never changes. You know, we don't have to reinvent the mission of the church. We don't have to reinvent what we do. It's the same mission that the apostles were given at Pentecost. It's the same mission that Francis Xavier and Francis of Assisi took up. It's the same mission that the Canadian martyrs heard in their heart and lived out. It's the same mission that, you know, the missionaries to Africa had. It's the same mission of, you know, the early Jesuits into India. It was the same mission of the early church as she expanded beyond the Holy Land. It was a mission to take the person of Jesus to the world. So John Paul II, in his great document, Redemptoris Missio, discusses the need for new ardor, new methods, and new expression. And we can get hung up on the new part of those, but it's not the new part that actually really matters. It's the ardor itself. It's the expression of our faith. It's the transmission of the faith, which is the invitation to friendship with Christ. We live in a particular cultural milieu. We live in a certain time, you know. We live in Canada in the year 2024, and so the way in which, obviously, the gospel is expressed, you know, takes on a new language. I mean, literally, modern English is what we're evangelizing, or in French. The particular methods that we use, the way, you know, social media and the use of, you know, technology and whatnot, yeah, that. But I sometimes think we get too hung up on that. I think we think we had the right technology if we could all master Twitter or whatever. I mean, I'm not any of the social media platforms. We could just find a new and creative way of expressing it, that all of a sudden people would begin to respond in a profound way. It's not to say that's not important, but I think we've often forgotten the very simple heart of it. That the proposal of the church is Jesus Christ. And we want things complicated. We want big plans. We want textbooks on these things. How do we evangelize? You know, we need to PhDs in event. No, we don't need any of that. Any more than how do we pray? We sit with the Lord. We open our heart to Him. We speak and we listen. You don't have to have a PhD in spirituality in order to pray. Now, I'm not, I've spent lots of time in school. I don't have a problem with academia. I think it's wonderful. I think, our theological, we have to continue to penetrate the great mysteries of the faith, all that stuff, of course. But at the heart of prayer is simply the self-gift of God to us and our reception of that gift and our return of the gift of ourselves to Him. It's not complicated. And the work of mission, it's not complicated. Now, our particular moment in the church is what John Paul II called this new evangelization, which is now kind of starting to sound old and stale. But it was simply the realization that the situation has shifted such that we need to re-evangelize the baptized. And there's always a sense in history of the church in which we need to re-evangelize the baptized, but particularly now with huge swaths of the church, particularly in the West. Canada's not as far gone as Europe, but it's further gone than the USA. But where, let's just pick a number, let's say 80-85% of baptized people are not practicing the faith. Certainly not regular. They're certainly not living out, let's say, the precepts of the church. Because they haven't had a profound encounter with Christ that changes everything and which calls forth the response of their life. And so we don't have to get caught up on new evangelization, old evangelization, mission agendas. It's just I think it's the simple recognition John Paul II had that baptism, and I'll explain this more later, don't misunderstand me, but baptism isn't sufficient. Now, of course it's sufficient, of course, in one sense that it brings us into sanctified grace, and if we remain in sanctified grace, we're saved. But baptism is supposed to be echoed in conversion. The reason we evangelize the baptized isn't because they're not baptized, it's because they haven't been fully converted. So, that's just a bit of I'm gonna dig into those themes a little bit more, but at the end of the day, if we remember one thing, is that the mission of the church is very simply to bring Jesus to others, to speak of Him, to allow His life to penetrate us deeply, that it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in us. That we become a new Theotokos, that people see in us Christ Himself. So as Father Justin said, my name is Michael Dopp. I looked at the other speakers, and it's really wonderful because I have connections. I think Audrey already is speaking. So I was kind of just an average lukewarm baptized Catholic. I went to church, but that was about it. And then through some very providential circumstances, I ended up going to World Youth Day in Rome in the year 2000 with Catholic Christian Outreach. I went because I love to travel, and because I knew that the young priest at a parish that I had gone to would be willing to pay for me to go in, because it was a pilgrimage. So what's better? You get to go to see Italy for the summer, and you get to go for free. And, I was Catholic, so I found it interesting to go to this whole World Youth Day thing. And it was there that I, for the first time, really encountered other Catholics that were living out their faith in a deep and intentional and a beautiful way, and that I, in my own life, began to surrender myself at different dimensions of myself to the Lord for His sake, and that He may reveal to me what He was calling me to. About 8 years after that, I finished my school and I 3 different things. And then I founded Mission of Redeemer Ministries, where I worked for about a dozen years. And we were working primarily in Canada, the United States, and England, informing and equipping Catholics for the work of the New Evangelization. So one of the things Father mentioned was the New Evangelization Summit. We also had an online program called You Evangelize. We had a summer institute that we were involved with, and a few other projects. We had a podcast, and I know one of your last speakers, Patrick Brown, who I collaborated with on the podcast Crown and Crozier. He's going to be speaking to you. So I kind of spent about a dozen years of my life sort of working with my ministry, partnering with other groups, sort of on my own though, traveling to parishes, dioceses, universities, helping people to try to figure out this evangelization thing. And I think, there's a lot that I learned in it, but the one thing that I learned, which I think may be valuable for you, is that the deficiency right now, the lack of evangelical action, activity within the church, let's say, isn't primarily because people have not been equipped to evangelize. That's an essential part of it, and that's kind of my piece of the puzzle. But the more I did it, the more I realized that that wasn't what was holding people back, even though they thought it was. If I just knew more, if I just went on another weekend, if I just read the right book, maybe I should go and do a master's in theology, if I just, studied it more, then I would evangelize. That was the problem. Is that they hadn't been converted to the mission of the church. I mean, there's the first problem. Many Catholics haven't been converted, period. But then, as Father James Malcolm says, we have to be converted to Christ, we have to be converted to his church, and then we have to be converted to his mission. And evangelization wasn't seen as an integral part of being a Catholic. It was kind of this interesting add-on that we would consider after we've thought about it for a long time. But the Second Vatican Council said that in virtue of baptism we have two fundamental vocations. The one is to sanctity, and the other one is to mission. So evangelization isn't something that some Catholics choose to do. It's meant to be, it's intended to be, it is part of our identity as Catholics. And that identity hasn't been received. Because if it had been, what we would see is people just out evangelizing, even if they were doing it imperfectly. We would see a greater passion for it. We would just see more people speaking more openly about their faith, inviting people to places of encounter with the Lord. And so we have to, it's actually, what we have to fill their minds is actually the capturing of their hearts first for Christ's mission. Why it matters. And I may sound like a 16th century Jesuit, but at the end of the day, it's because people have mortal souls and we want them saved. We don't like that language. It makes us uncomfortable in the church today. Maybe it doesn't make you uncomfortable, but it makes a lot of Catholics uncomfortable. But shouldn't. Like, what's greater than the gift that we wish to give, which is that our souls are united to the one for whom we long, the one whom we love, the one who first loved us. So I would say, again, the rest of my talk is also showing a bit of the fruit of what I've seen and what I've learned, but I think that's a great place for us to start, because if we just fill people's mind with all the tools for evangelization, how to give a testimony, what's the charisma, all these things, it doesn't go anywhere because they're not intrinsically motivated to do it. They're still terrified. And it's not until we fall in love with Christ's mission that we're given the gift of courage that can overcome the fears that hold us back. Okay. I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. I continued my work with Mission of the Redeemer, and then a year and a half ago, for visa reasons, I had to mostly set that aside, and I now work at a parish, St. Vincent de Paul, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which none of you have ever heard of, which is it's a great tragedy. Hopefully one day you'll listen this year, because it's something very, very special. But what it's allowed me to do is to be on the ground and see the life of the parish as it actually happens. So I'm very grateful that the Lord has allowed me to kind of merge, my academic studies with my, kind of broad experience of the church, and now in a very concrete way incarnated this parish. I moved here with my family. At the time I had 4 children. Therese, whose feast day is today. Anna, whose birthday was yesterday. Francis, who's named after the great missionary Francis Xavier. The tour of the Arm of Francis was making its way through Canada at the time that my wife was pregnant. And then Benedict, who is hopefully one day our little monk, named after both Pope Benedict but also a great founder of monasticism. And then 10 months ago, the Lord blessed us with our 5th child, Mary Elizabeth Philomena, who is a great joy. I'm married to a girl by the name of Linda Smith. Linda is born north of Toronto. She's about 5 feet tall. She has brown hair. She likes canoeing. She studied engineering at Queen's, and then she did her master's in biomedical engineering at the University of Toronto, and then MA in theology at Regis College. She likes walking, hiking, natural medicine. It's my wife. But I can tell you something else about my wife. that Linda is, in this world, the absolute love of my life. That I probably think about her probably somewhere between 50 and 100 times a day. That she is a model for me of faith in the midst of immense suffering, and like no one close to me, that she is able to keep her eyes focused on God when there's 1,000 things that wish to tear her away from Him. And we've been married 15 years, and we've had many wonderful years. We've had some very difficult years, and in the midst of the difficult years of the very difficult moments in my life, she's been an absolute rock for me. When my life has felt like it's been unraveling, she has been the one thing that has kept my life, kept me together. And so she's the world to me. I mean, I am absolutely head over heels, madly, deeply in love with her. And I would not be the father that I am, the man that I am, the husband that I am, the Catholic that I am, if it wasn't for her. She is beautiful on the outside, she is beautiful on the inside, and she is nothing but a pure gift to me. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I just spoke about my wife in two different ways. I told you she was born in Toronto, 5 feet tall, brown hair. Remember, she studied at Queen's University. She's in natural medicine. You all heard that, right? Mm-hmm. That's how we usually talk about Jesus. We give the details. This is what he said. This is what he did. This is when he lived. Isn't that interesting? None of you found my description of where she was born or her height or where she studied or that you would like to know interesting. In fact, you were probably even wondering, why is he telling me that? Why do I even care? And then what did I do? Then I shared as a lover. Because Linda's not a historical figure to me. She's not just some girl that exists as 5 feet tall. I don't care how tall she is. I love her with my whole heart. When we evangelize, we can't talk about Jesus as the historical figure. We have to speak about him as lovers. Because we are in love with him. The pastor I work for said when he dies, he wants people to say one thing about him. That he was a man in love. We don't speak about Jesus like we love him. We speak about him like a neighbor that we're giving historical information about. We're not used to speaking that way. In fact, I bet when I was saying how much I love my wife and going on, some of you maybe felt a bit uncomfortable, like, well, why is he sharing that? like it's almost too much. But when we're in love, we can't. We can't not do that. So I'm going to have you do something right now. I'm going to have you pair up. We're going to take 6 minutes for this. You're each going to have 3 minutes. I want you, to each other, to share who Jesus is. And I want you to speak like a man in love. And if you're not in love, I want you to repent of not being in love. And if you are in love, I want you to speak from the bottom of your heart about your beloved. They may hear who he is. Okay? So 6 minutes, 3 minutes each. Just put in pairs right now. Speak about the one that you love. wrap it up, I'm going to switch and I'll have everyone share about their beloved.
Sorry, hang on. We're not listening to you. We're still sharing about Jesus. Go away.
So where are we at? We're ready.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we didn't have enough time. We need to be lovers. That's what people need to hear. If you've never spoken to your people that way about Jesus, I would humbly suggest that you think about doing that. They know that you know a lot about Jesus. They know that. They know you're well educated and you know your scriptures and you know your theology. That's not what wins people. It's important. It's good. What wins people is seeing men and women that are in love. We have to recapture that. I want to share with you an analogy that I think that I've found helpful when kind of looking at the pastoral work that I do and kind of keeping this in mind. So I intended to bring it, but I forgot it at home. But I wanted to hold up an acorn and ask you what it is, whether it was an oak tree or not. And the obvious answer to whether an acorn is an oak tree is no, it's not. But to the question of is it an oak, the answer is yes. And you'll remember back from your philosophy days, potentia and in potential and in act. And so the acorn is an oak. It's an oak tree in potentia, right? It can become an oak. It has all that it needs within it, within its own power, given the right conditions, to become an oak tree. And I find a very helpful distinction of baptism. This Shirley Dopp was in forming intentional disciples, between what's called virtus fidei and actus fidei, the virtue of faith and the act of faith. So can ask, when a child is baptized, I always, like to trick people with this question, does that baby have faith? And if they say yes, I say, how can you say that? They don't know who Jesus is. They can't recite the creed. They don't know anything. How can you say that baby has faith? And if they say, no, the baby doesn't have faith, I say, don't you believe in the power of the sacraments? I mean, what do you think the sacraments give them? Gives them, infused grace and theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. You don't believe in the sacraments? So, the truth is that we have to make a distinction. So, they receive the virtus fide, the virtue of faith, the power to believe, the capacity to believe. But they don't have the actus fide. The actus fide is the act of faith. The I believe. Like, you believe now that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. That's the act of faith that my daughter, the 10-month-old, who's been validly baptized, doesn't have. Now, if you ask an 8-year-old, do you have faith? Well, of course I'm baptized. I understand that. I know you're baptized. I believe in baptism. But do you believe? And in the church, maybe it's coming out of the Reformation. Maybe there's other reasons. But we put a great emphasis on the virtus fide. Great. I mean, I'm not suggesting anything different than that. But the virtus fide is supposed to mature into the actus fide. That when we say the creed, we say it because we believe it. And we sometimes, because people have been baptized, because they are engaged in some way in the life of the parish and the life of the church, they continue to come to Mass, kind of receive the sacraments, we assume the actus fide. I think that's sometimes a false assumption. I mean, some they openly disbelieve. So we get at the acorn. How does the acorn become the oak tree? The acorn becomes the oak tree by a certain set of conditions. So it needs to be in soil, and the soil needs to be a certain temperature, in the ambient environment. The air needs to be a certain temperature. It needs oxygen. It needs light. And it needs water. And if it's given those, it will become an oak tree. But if it's lacking those, obviously it's stunted. I mean, nobody sees a 2-foot acorn tree and says, wow, it's actualized all of its potential. We look at a stunted little oak tree and we sort of say, oh, it didn't become all it could be. No one looks at the acorn and says, wow, that acorn, it's just become everything that you could ever imagine that it could be. No, the acorn exists to become a mighty oak tree. An oak tree in its lifetime, the largest oak trees in their lifetime will produce over 10 million other acorns. So it becomes fruitful and multiplying. And it's the same thing in our soul. That we have this acorn, we have this virtus fide, it has all the potential, it has the power to become something great, and we settle for these souls becoming these little teeny tiny, 2-foot trees. And I went to Born Youth in Rome, I was like a 3-foot oak tree, thinking, isn't this amazing? I'm 3 feet tall, I've got a 1/4 inch diameter, I've got 6 little leaves on me. This is amazing. But given the right conditions, there's spiritually infinitely more. Even in the analogy, there's there's so much more for that tree. We have to create the conditions for that to flourish. Now, I'm 100% in with the Catholic Church. I'm all about the emphasis on the sacraments, but we have to ask ourselves, how are we then creating the conditions around which that seed that is power, that it can then grow and bear fruit? So I want to suggest that in all we do, there's the call to the deeper faith, to the personal faith that's born out of theological faith. So, I'll give you an example, baptismal prep. I was speaking, I'm going to skip that story. In our baptismal prep, so now what I want to do now is briefly walk through what we're doing at my parish. Not because it's perfect, but there's a few things that we're doing. There's lots of things we're doing that aren't great. But there's a few things that we're doing that I think we're on the right track. So here's the first one. Our baptismal preparation. What did we notice? We noticed that many people that went through our baptismal preparation, which consisted of 1 hour talk on kind of catechesis on baptism, what's baptism all about, how do you get godparents, what does a ritual look like, 1 hour on that, and then another evening, which was an hour on Christian parenting. What we realized was that it was having no effect. Why? Well, because lots of people that were coming, they had fallen away from the faith, they weren't practicing the faith themselves, so you give them a bit of catechesis, they smile and they nod, they have their child baptized, and we never see them again. I was speaking to a group of priests in Toronto, and it was in Niagara Falls. This was like 10 years ago. And there was priests that had been ordained between 7 and 10 years from around Ontario. And I asked them, of the last 100 people that have come to your baptismal preparation program who were not practicing Catholics, how many of them are now practicing faith? Like, you did something with them. You met with them, or you put them through a program, or you did something. How many of them are now practicing Catholics? And there were 3 priests that answered that question, and each of them gave me the same answer, and it was 0. That not a single person that came through their baptismal preparation program who wasn't practicing the faith became engaged in the life of church. For me, that's just not acceptable. That means we're not doing something right. What is it that we're missing? Well, we're assuming that acorn is going to grow into a mighty oak tree without the conditions around it. And so we're just continuing the cycle. It's like the faith didn't catch with the parents, but we'll just baptize this child and just hope that somehow miraculously this acorn is becoming an oak tree. Acorns becoming oak trees, that is a miracle. But it's not miraculous in that it just appears one day. If you want the acorn to become an oak tree, everything around it, all the conditions, reception of the sacraments, hearing the good news of Jesus Christ, developing a life of prayer, holy friendships, all of these things have to surround that so that the potential can be actualized. So, we basically realized that people coming for a baptismal preparation program here, not all of them, but more than half, were unevangelized. What these people didn't need was a 30-minute catechesis on sacramental theology, the sacramental theology of baptism. Not that it's wrong, not that it's bad, not that they should know it. But it wasn't having any effect on their lives. So what we're doing instead is we're putting them through an 8-part series called the Rescue Project. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it. If you're not, I would highly recommend you look into it. It's not unlike Alpha, but I think it's way better. And I'm kind of an Alpha fan. I think Alpha's good. This is run by, or created by Father John Ricardo from Archdiocese of Detroit. He runs Acts 29. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's like Alpha in that it's kind of the same thing. You have a meal, you watch a video, you have a discussion. It's like Alpha in that it's over the course of 8 weeks and there's a retreat. It's not like Alpha in that it's like super duper Catholic. And it doesn't hit on, Alpha is wide and thin. The Rescue Project is narrow but very deep. It's a very rich presentation of the Creamer. Now, people will say, well, how can you get people who are coming for baptism to give up 8 weeks? We just do it. We just tell them. And what happens if they can't do it? Then we figure out something else. So right now we're getting somewhere around 60 to 70% of couples are agreeing to it. And you're all thinking, but people in my parish never agreed to it. Actually, I think that's wrong. We just tell them this is what we do. At this parish, we take it really serious. We want to give you the very best possibility for being great parents. And we're gonna provide you with a meal. There's a video. You're gonna get to meet a bunch of other people that are having kids at the same time. We get people to sign up before. We advertise it for women that are pregnant, so they're signing up before they have the child, so they're not, in the craziness of having a 2-month-old child. And yes, we get some pushback, but not from most. Most parishes don't try because they're afraid everyone's going to push back, and that's just not true. And when they do push back, we say, well, we know it's a great commitment, but you're going to get a free meal, you're going to meet great people. If you have to miss one, we get it. And if they keep pushing back, we say, well, we'll do something else with you. And then, we send them some videos from Eucharist of Congress, and we have them write a little reflection on it, and, we do something else for them. It's, okay, you know what, we're not going to get 100%, but we're getting 60 to 70%, and they're going through 8 weeks, and this is what I know, is that at the end of those 8 weeks, they have heard the gospel of Jesus Christ proclaimed in an absolutely beautiful, profound, winsome way. That's what I know. Are they all going to respond to it? Nope. Are they all going to come back to the practice of faith? Nope. And some are. We're going to get more than 0%. What are we going to get? I don't know. 25%? 40%? 60%? I mean, it's all better than 0. The other thing that it's done is it's actually poured on the love of the parish. Are you going to provide a meal for us? Would you invest in us over the course of these 8 weeks? That you would connect us with other people that are in the same life situation as us? Like we're all in for you guys. We're all in for you. This parish is your home. So rather than, a talk in a dark room on a Thursday night for 45 minutes about baptismal theology, which you're not interested in, we just pour on the love and present the gospel. Now some of you are saying, but then they don't know their baptismal theology. I'm just well, some of it comes through in the videos for sure. But if we can get them re-engaged in the life of faith, we've got them for the next 45 years. We'll get their baptismal theology to them. We'll figure all that out. Okay, what's the insight there? The insight, and it's an obvious one, you all know it, but this is it incarnated. We must evangelize before we catechize. We just have to present the gospel in every opportunity that we have. And the low-hanging fruit is people that want to have their kids baptized. Because they are literally knocking on our doors saying, I'm here. What do I have to do? All right. I just want one more point on that, which is that we do this because most of the people coming out here, people baptized, their children baptized, they lack conversion. Paul VI said, the church evangelizes when she seeks to convert. If we're not seeking to convert people, then we're not evangelizing. We may be doing all sorts of other good work, but we're not actually carrying out the mission of the church. But that word conversion makes us nervous. It makes us nervous. We think of any people that had 4 saints in their arm. John Paul II. Conversion is accepting by a personal decision the saving sovereignty of Christ. It's the actus fide. It's the invitation to allow that seed planted in baptism to flourish into personal faith, to become the I believe. And if there's people that are knocking on our doors and want to have their kids baptized, the very best thing I can think of is doing for them is inviting them to that. The proposal, the content of the charisma, what it is they are called to believe in, and then the invitation to say yes to it, to give themselves over to it. Okay. So that's one thing we're doing. The second thing, and then I'm not asking you to replicate anything, I'm not suggesting anything, I've only been here for a year, but this is the best, maybe it's not the best, but it's one way that these are ways that I'm trying to see all the opportunities within a parish through a missionary lens. And so what's key is that missionary lens. It's not key to do the things that we're doing, but it's seeing everything as the evangelical opportunity for Jesus to be proclaimed. One of the things we instituted was a new parishioner welcome dinner. So what do you do for your new parishioners when they come? Someone knocks on your door, they want to get registered in the parish, what do you do? Well, if you're like a lot of parishes, you give them envelopes. Like parishes have signs that say, get registered so we can give you envelopes. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Please, Father, if you have that in your parish, rip that down when you get back. That's the first thing we need to get rid of. What does that say to people? Give us your money. So what do? We're not perfect, okay? This is what we do. We put on a super fancy dinner for them. We do it 3 times a year. Like appetizers, wine, beer, like $50 a person, American. It's a lot of money. We have, our last one we had. And then, okay, so what we do is we have 3 times. So as soon as they register, we give them a save the date for the new parishioner welcome dinner. And then one of my colleagues, who's all into cute stuff, a beautiful card, invitation, handwritten on the front, mails it out to them, so they'll RSVP. And if they don't RSVP, then she calls them, hey, we're so thrilled you're a parishioner here. We're having this new parishioner welcome dinner. We'd love to have you come. Are you available? And then what we do is we sit them at tables, and there's 4 or 6 at a table, and then we put 2 of our most engaged, winsome, beautiful, passionate, fun, energetic, awesome parishioners at each of those tables. So then there's appetizers, they have their appetizers, they sit and chat, they get to meet these really amazing parishioners, and then I do a little welcome, and then our pastor gets up. And he tells these people that he loves them. He's thrilled that they're here. We ask him where they're all from, he talks about that, and he says, I want to spend the rest of my life. I want to spend the rest of my life. He's got 21 more years that he'll be a pastor in this parish. I want to spend the next 21 years with you, and then I want to spend eternity with you. And we are absolutely thrilled that you're here. So thank you for joining our family. Then we have a beautiful meal, cater it. It's not cheap. It's not cheap, but listen, the Lord has brought these people to us. We want to treat them like we love them. And then, one of our primary evangelical tools before I became part of the parish, but we still use this Christ Renews His Parish, which is a weekend retreat kind of like a Curcio. They've put on 150 of those in this parish since it started here. And so we have someone come up and give a testimony of how it changed their life and invite them to the next one. We don't tell them about all the ministries. We don't ask them to volunteer. We don't give them envelopes. We make no ask of them other than this. We actually do us. We first ask, go on a Christ Renews His Parish retreat. Now, Christ Renews is kind of dying out. In our parish, it's still going strong. There's so many conversions through it. Let's find out what it is in your parish. But what's the one thing I want them to go through? And it's not to get anything out of them. It's where can they go to hear the gospel? Alpha, Rescue Project, do Discovery Phase. It doesn't matter what it is. Make one ask. This is what we ask all of our new parishioners to go through. And then people are like, oh, I guess that's what I have to do to be a member of this parish. The second thing is we have an 24-hour adoration. We have an oratory that we built, the oratory of St. Mary Magdalene. It's absolutely gorgeous. And so we ask people to come and adore the Lord, to meet Him there. And then we just celebrate with them, and then send them on their way. So, we're spending thousands, we spent $10,000 on them this year. Now, we are a huge parish. We're the largest parish in the diocese. We're the wealthiest parish in the diocese. We have these sorts of resources. But even there, the business manager, he's nervous. We got our fingers wrapped the first time we put this on because the priest said, well, make it nice. Okay? So we spent $70 a person on them. The business manager's like, well, how nice is nice? Well, maybe too much. I don't know. But I'm like, you know what? The people that come are shocked. They've never been treated like that in parish. We don't serve the macaroni and cheese. It's not potluck. It's like everything is nice. And you have to do what you can do, right? Don't let the good become the enemy of the perfect, become the enemy of the good. I get that. But what if we treated these people like we actually were thrilled to get here? What if we treated them like we love them? And then what we do, we invite them to Christ Renews, we give information on that, and then the couple that's at the table, they follow up with them. They call them a week or two later. How are you doing? How's it going? What can I, questions about the parish, how can I help, this is meant to be a process. But it's a mind shift set. That, here's more parishioners, it's, more labor, more money, more whatever. No. These are immortal souls that the Lord has brought to us to be part of our family. Okay. The other thing we've done, and I've already alluded to this, is we put a big emphasis on the rescue project. Why do we do the rescue project? So what we're doing with the rescue project, we're putting it on for the parish at large. We feed them all. It's like $1,000 a week to do that. We're getting 150 people out of it. Why do we do it? Yes, Father.
Sorry, we're just at 7 minutes. Time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, sorry. I'll go 3 more minutes, and then if there's any quick questions. We do the rescue project because then the gospel is proclaimed. But what we're also trying to do is then the goal with the rescue project, we'll put it on the parish once a year. 150 people can come. We'll feed you all. We'll treat you like kings and queens. But the ask throughout it, it's a mix. It's mostly our parishioners, but it's also people from outside. But the ask is that you then need it in your own homes. So you've experienced it. You already have faith. You've gone through it. It's wonderful. But with something like the Rescue Project, often in a similar way, is that it gives them something it gives them an evangelical tool they can very easily use. The other reason we have Rescue Project is that it's a great landing spot. You're a new parishioner, doesn't work to go on Christ for News? We have this. We have about 50 people in our RCA this year, every one of them. We started the RCA in August, now it's on pause, they're all going through it. Why? Because even people coming to the church haven't necessarily heard the gospel. Someone meets a neighbor, meets a friend, they're kind of in the peripheries. We have this rescue project to get a free meal, we have babysitting, it's just a great night. So, Father James Mallett calls it the pump. We don't have to be doing 25 different things. We need to be doing one thing and do it really well. Anyway, I'll just stop there, right? Anyway, I have a number more, but I do want to give you just some time for comments, questions. I would just say the bottom line is, of those things I shared about my parish, it's not about duplicating, replicating. I mean, feel free to do anything, but I want to give those examples of ways that we're trying to look through all of our pastoral activity in the parish as an evangelical moment. In order to realize that evangelical moment, we ask ourselves, how is Jesus Christ proclaimed through this? Okay, so I'll open up for questions or comments.
Anyone have any comments, questions? You have to go to the microphone. Okay. So, Michael, awesome. But I don't think anyone had brothers, no? You're good?
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, I really want to thank you for that. It's really quite exceptional. So many practical. And then your exercise getting us to share 3 minutes each was remarkable. I can even think how I can use that in my parish. And you gave, even the parishioner welcome. As you know, St. Anthony's, we're doing a lot. I've learned so much. So a huge thanks to you.
Good.
No, Ajahn has one question, please. Michael.
Hello, Michael. I'm Father. You can see me. I'm Father Ajit from the Diocese of Kamloops, BC. And I really want to appreciate you giving us that few minutes to talk to each other about Jesus. And being a priest for 17 years, there's a lot of cultural shift I have been went through. One of the things I noticed that in my own personal life, maybe a cultural influence in me thought, okay, we don't know how to talk about Jesus all the time. Okay, just be practical about this meeting. Okay, let's get the agenda done, right? Make an Our Father, maybe glory be, just for the sake of the prayer. Maybe more shying away from talking about Jesus, and maybe something lesser, or maybe not needed so much. Anyway, I really want to thank you for giving us that opportunity, and it's a big challenge for me as a priest, because I may not hear from my own brother priest maybe saying about Jesus, maybe the bishops, the leaders may not talk about it, but so how powerful is St. John Paul II when he said that it's all about Jesus. I mean, it's a lot of strengthening. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you.
And Michael, we did just get a request right now. One of our brothers was asking if perhaps you would maybe a few times during the year, maybe like once or twice, would you just give us a webinar when we're back in our parishes, just sharing what you've learned?
I'd love to. Absolutely. Anything I can do for you, I'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it
was
was
in the beginning,
now,
is now, and shall be, world without end.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Michael.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
God bless you.